guys, this is part 2 on my video about Urza. Last time I touched on some very important things, so if you haven't seen part 1, I'd recommend watching that first. Urza was still obsessed with Mishra's death. Urza protected his body well, but neglected his soul. What he needed to center his focus on was defending Dominaria from the Phyrexians. Sancha wanted to help Urza, so she found a young human slave in Dominaria who looked very similar to Mishra. The young slave's name was Retepe, or Rat for short. Sancha recruited Rat to impersonate Mishra in the hope that Urza would then be able to focus on the more important issues like defeating the Phyrexians. Sancha coached Rat and then brought Rat posing as Mishra to Urza. Rat was able to hear Urza's Weakstone singing to him, and he successfully talked Urza into focusing his efforts on the Phyrexians. Rat ended up staying and becoming an important member of the team. He continued to help out Urza, and he even became Sancha's lover. One day, Urza and Sancha were being pursued by Phyrexians, and they wandered into Serra's realm. Serra's realm was an artificial plane created by the planeswalker Serra. It was created from pure white mana as a heavenly ideal. Both Urza and Sancha were unconscious in Serra's realm, and they were brought before Serra for judgment. Because Urza had a white mana essence, he was allowed to stay and be healed. Serra told them to guard Urza as he healed. 5 years they stood. Sancha had a black essence. This would normally mean that she would be put to death. However, Serra could sense that a piece of Urza was residing within Sancha. Because Serra was unsure what this meant, she decided to hold off on killing Sancha until she knew whether or not it would harm Urza. Besides, it seemed like Sancha was going to die anyway. They had Sancha put on one of the islands in isolation, and Serra left one of her sisters to watch over her. Sancha recovered as well, and when she awoke on the island, she found that black mana could be felt all across the realm. Serra had no intention to harm Sancha. Serra told Urza, "Sancha is recovering. The medicine is slow, but my magic would have killed her." The Archangels, however, had a different idea, and one day they were alerted to Sancha's location on the island. The Archangels came with Aegis, a diamond-shaped device that could create deadly beams of fire. The Aegis injured the sister that was charged to watch over Sancha, and it temporarily blinded Sancha. At this point, Serra found out what was happening, and immediately she tried to stop it. Sancha and the sister were brought back to Serra's palace, and Sancha was finally reunited with Urza. Urza and Sancha then left the plane. In pursuit of Urza, the Phyrexians sent countless foul legions into Serra's realm. Though beaten back, they left it tainted with uncleansable evil. The realm's defenders put up a good fight, but heavy casualties were still inflicted, and they caused permanent damage to Serra's realm. Even though the realm was still functional, the black mana's presence was enough to cause the plane to lose its purity and perfection. Fast forward a little while, and we find Urza, Retepe, and Sancha in the caves of Koyos, engaged in a battle with the Phyrexian demon Gix. Through ruthlessness and raw ambition, Gix had rose through the Phyrexian regime to the exalted rank of Praetor. Even while overseeing many of Phyrexia's most important undertakings, Gix continued his own quest for supremacy, for in Phyrexia, the weak become fodder for the strong. Gix was in command of a Phyrexian incursion. He was a monstrous creature of bone, metal, and flesh. Almost all of Gix's organic body parts had been replaced by artifice. Gix tried to destroy Urza using a temporal shift, but he was thwarted and hurled into the portal by Sancha and Retepe. Sadly, both Sancha and Retepe were killed in this process. But thanks to their sacrifice, Gix was also defeated during the battle. It is unknown whether or not Gix was destroyed, or if he was merely transported to a different time period. During the battle, Urza learned information about the shared Phyrexian history with the Thran. Urza had pretty much moved on from the obsession over his brother's death at this point, but he developed a new obsession with the past. Urza knew that the Phyrexian threat was more dangerous than ever. In response to this threat, Urza created an Academy of Magic and Technology on the island of Talaria. It was both a school and a research facility. The research conducted there was on weapons that could be used in the upcoming war. Urza summoned the most talented artificers, sorcerers, mathematicians, and biologists to study in his prestigious school. Baron was among those summoned by Urza. Baron was a legendary master wizard, and he played an important role in creating the academy and in the defense of Dominaria from Phyrexia. Urza told Baron, "Books can be replaced, a prize student cannot. Be patient." Some notable students who attended the academy were Teferi, Joyra, Gatha, and Urtai. The students at the academy were there to train so that they could one day lead Dominaria's defense during the Phyrexian invasion. There was some drama at the academy. One day, Joyra found a man named Carrick crashed on the Tolarian beach with his ship. Joyra rescued Carrick. In Joyra's eyes, Carrick was a strong man, just like the ones in her tribe of Gitu, and she fell for him. Joyra built a small house on the beach for herself and Carrick. But little did she know, Carrick was actually a Phyrexian sleeper agent. At night, Joyra would sneak out and go visit him. He was her secret guest and her secret lover. Fun fact, Teferi actually had a crush on Joyra at the same time, but she saw him as just another immature boy at the academy. There were other important things going on at the academy as well. Many important magical creations arose here. Using the information Urza had learned from Gix and using the technology developed by those in his genius academy, Urza was able to create a powerful time machine that allows him to gaze into the past. He could now see the ancient war that led to Phyrexian banishment. He wanted to send something back in time that could destroy Yawgmoth before he could even corrupt the Thran Empire. But before he could use his time machine, Urza needed to create a being that could enter the rifts to change the past. After 100 failed experiments, Urza was stunned to find that common silver passed through the portal undamaged. He immediately designed a golem made of the metal. Urza used Xantia's Heartstone to create this being. Now, Heartstone is actually really cool. It is an object that a Phyrexian newt receives when they are created. A Heartstone glows when the creature is living, and it turns black when the creature dies. This is what gives the Phyrexians sentience. Urza used Xantia's Heartstone to create a silver golem named Karn. Karn's purpose was to be a probe that Urza could use in his time-traveling experiments. The reason Urza used Xantia's Heartstone to create Karn was so the golem would be fully sentient. This way, Karn would develop a personality that could grow and evolve and make decisions. Karn was even able to develop friendships. His closest friend was Joyra. One night, Karn was sent back in time a few hours in one of Urza's time-traveling experiments. Karn was wandering around on the beach. It was here that Karn discovered Carrick and Joyra, but because he was Joyra's friend, Karn promised them that he wouldn't tell anyone. In another trip to the past, Karn witnessed Carrick stealing blueprints from Urza's lab. Karn followed Carrick, taking advantage of the fact that he was unfazed with this past world. Karn followed Carrick through the secret passage that Joyra used to sneak out of the academy, and he continued to follow Carrick into the woods, where he witnessed a secret Phyrexian meeting. During this meeting, Karn overheard the Phyrexians' plans of invading the academy. By the time Karn returned to the present, it was too late to warn Urza. Carrick had already brought Phyrexian negators into the academy, and the attack on the academy was already happening. The negators were slaughtering both teachers and students. Karn fought his way to Joyra's room, where he found her body covered in blood on the ground. She had been killed by a negator. Karn fought and slayed the negator that killed her, and then he returned to Urza and suggested that they use the time machine to prevent the attack in the first place. Urza agreed with Karn and sent him back once more, even though the time machine was near an overload. In the past, Karn was able to catch Carrick. He even broke his leg in the process. Then suddenly, Karn was forcefully pulled back into the present because the temporal vortex drew too much energy and overloaded. The time machine cast arcing rays of temporal energy and instantly aged parts of the lab into dust. Basically, the time machine exploded. This tragically resulted in the destruction of the Tolarian Academy. It killed the inhabitants, and it covered the island in strange, sometimes horrible, temporal disturbances. Urza quickly used his Planeswalker ability to petrify the students and staff nearest him, 14 people total, including Baron. and he planeswalked these 14 people away to safety. Urza was guilt-ridden by the whole thing. He had caused another explosion. Urza has a habit of doing this. The first explosion was the one that killed Tokasia, and then there was that explosion that killed his brother and sent Dominaria into an ice age, and now here's the third explosion that destroyed his academy and its inhabitants. The crazy thing is, this isn't even going to be the last devastating explosion caused by Urza. At least both Karn and Urza survived without injury, and during the fiasco, they were able to learn even more about the history of the enemy. 10 years later, Urza returned to rebuild the academy. Upon his return, he found that Carrick, the sleeper agent, as well as some other Phyrexians, survived the time machine's explosion. They were trapped in a pocket of extreme fast time, where they were able to construct an enormous Phyrexian fortress and army. Carrick's corrupt domain smelled like a blister on Tellaria's skin. Carrick was lord of that fortress, and from inside the rift, he focused on growing his army and devising plans to attack Urza and the new academy. With limited resources and near unlimited time, Carrick used parts from one beast to build another. They had years to prepare, while the rest of the world had mere minutes. Luckily, the Phyrexians were unable to act on their plans, as they had no way to leave the time rift. The only way the Phyrexians could hope to escape was by waiting for a mutation to arise that would create a temporal rift-proof Phyrexian. Here you see Eviscerator. The flavor text says, "It roamed the time bubble like a captured animal. Carrick knew he must soon find a way to unleash it on Tellaria or destroy it." In the meantime, Urza found a way to use the temporal rifts throughout Tellaria to his advantage. He used water from slow time bubbles to derive potions that could extend a promising student's life by years. Urza also engineered magical armor that allowed Tellarian researchers to finish decades of work in mere hours in fast time bubbles. Thanks to these temporal distortions, Urza had an advantage in his work against the Phyrexian invasion force. But he couldn't stay at the academy and wait for the Phyrexians trapped in the rift to attack. Urza needed to focus more on the real Phyrexian invasion, so he left the academy. Urza traveled to the hostile volcanic land of Shiv. Phyrexia had tried to take Urza's soul. He was relieved that Shiv only tried to claim his souls. He confronted the Viashino rulers of the ancient Thran mana rig. When Urza asked the Viashino what it did, they answered, "It hums." He needed to use the mana rig. The Viashino had learned how to operate the rig through trial and error. Mostly error. Urza used it to create a steady supply of power stones. This meant that he would always have plenty of resources for anything he might want to do. He also discovered a type of Thran metal that he would utilize later. This metal could grow beyond its original shape. While here, he united the Viashino with a race of goblins. This gave Urza an idea. He was going to unite all of Dominaria to work together in the upcoming war. In order to ensure his victory, Urza began to travel throughout Dominaria in an attempt to create alliances with multiple races. Urza traveled to Yavimaya, a thickly forested mountainous region on the southern coast of Terracer. Yavimaya was under the domain of Multani, a Mara sorcerer. Multani had a deep hatred of Urza since the destruction of Argoth. When Urza arrived, Multani pretended to peacefully welcome him. Urza's wards fell from him like autumn leaves as he entered the Dreaming Grove. Urza awoke imprisoned in living wood. Multani wanted to punish Urza for destroying Argoth and for killing his fellow nature spirit Titania. Titania was a Mara sorcerer in the forest of Argoth. She was even considered a goddess by some. During the Brothers' War, Titania was weakened by Urza and Mishra's armies plundering her forests. Titania had attempted to negotiate with Urza and Mishra, but they refused to leave her forests. Titania was killed when Urza activated the Golgothian Silex during the final battle on Argoth. Multani still held a grudge about this. While Urza was trapped in the Magnagoth, Multani forced him to feel all the pain Titania had felt. Meanwhile, the Tolarian Academy was being overrun once again. Urza was able to escape the Magnagoth when Baron summoned Urza. However, during the escape, Multani became trapped with Urza. This allowed Multani to witness the battle and the horrors of the Phyrexians firsthand. Multani allied with Urza in destroying Carrick and all of Carrick's minions. Multani even promised to provide his and Yavimaya's help again in the future. After the battle, Urza began his work on what he called the Salvation of Dominaria. Urza's new project was a flying ship capable of sonic speeds, as well as the ability to plane shift between worlds. The ship was going to be armed with the best weaponry conceived, and it would be piloted by the best fighters. The ship was built with a frame of Thran metal, and the hull of the ship was created from the weather seed, which had been provided by Multani. The weather seed was from the heart of Yavimaya, the central Magnagoth tree in the Yavimayan forest. This ship was going to be the key part of Urza's battle plan against the Phyrexian invaders, and he called it the Sky Ship Weatherlight. There was only one problem. Urza needed to find a way to power the ship's mana battery. The mana energy needed to charge the ship's Power Stone core was an entire plane's worth. Basically, in order to save his world, Urza would have to sacrifice another world. He regretted his decision, but he followed through with it nonetheless. He decided to use the energy from Sarah's realm, which was now overrun by Phyrexians. Sarah had abandoned her plane after she realized that her paradise had been corrupted by the black mana. Now, Radiant Angel was in charge of the realm. Radiant was a militant archangel whose policies resulted in the death of thousands. Urza attempted to reason with Radiant, but it was useless, as Radiant had gone practically insane ever since Sarah's departure. Urza told her, "Do not treat your people as you treat your artifacts. Let them go, and they will live. Seal them here, and they will die." Radiant even accused Urza of conspiring with the Phyrexians, and she vowed to kill him if he did not leave immediately. It's rather funny that Radiant was accusing Urza of conspiring with Phyrexians, because unbeknownst to her, her chief advisor Gorig was actually a Phyrexian sleeper agent. Urza wanted to save as many people from Sarah's realm as he could. Urza brought many brave Dominarians to fight Radiant's angels, and Urza fought Radiant himself. Urza probably wouldn't have survived had it not been for the Shivan dragon Garadaragaz, Ramadaragaz's mother. Sadly, Garadaragaz died during this battle. Radiant Angel ripped out Urza's eyes, which were actually the Might Stone and the Weak Stone. And when she attempted to put the two stones back together, there was a huge explosion that destroyed both Radiant and Sarah's sanctum. With a heavy heart, Urza doused one world's light to rekindle another's. Urza evacuated as many of the realm's inhabitants as he could on the Weatherlight before the plane's demise. He was also successful in trapping the planar energy before it was erased from existence. After all this, Urza realized that the skyship Weatherlight still would not be enough to stop the Phyrexians. In the flavor text on the card Opportunity, Baron says, "Urza cocooned himself alone in his workshop for months. When he finally emerged, all broad grins and excited chatter, I knew he'd found his answer." Urza worked on what he called the Legacy. Each artifact in the Legacy was powerful itself, but when put together, they would be enough to destroy even Yawgmoth. Urza also needed an organic living component, just in case something happened to him before the Phyrexian invasion. He needed an heir. This is why he created the Bloodline Project. The Bloodline Project was the focus of the entire Tolarian Academy's resources for decades. The Bloodlines experiment consisted of breeding and crossbreeding the various races of Dominaria to create beings with all the traits necessary to save the world. The Bloodlines Project took a very long time, and it displayed that Urza was beginning to abandon his morality. Baron drowned his doubts about Urza's project by delving ever deeper into its details. Urza's test subjects were showing improved musculature and battle prowess, but they were greatly lacking in their mental abilities. If the eyes are windows to the soul, their souls are not of this world. Baron started to notice that some of the test subjects had frightening mutations. Many were born with gross and out of proportion limbs or heads. The Academy scholars began to resign because they had no desire to help create these horrors. In response, Urza held some of the former scholars prisoner and wouldn't allow them to leave. It was during this time that Baron fell in love and married Rain, the Academy's chancellor. However, Rain was a native Tolarian, which meant that she could easily have been one of the products of the Bloodlines experiment. It's even possible that Urza engineered Rain specifically to be the perfect wife for Baron. This is all speculation, but I wouldn't put it beyond Urza to do something like this. The flavor text on Thieving Magpie says, Rain once made several unkind comparisons between the bird's naked opportunism and Urza's. Baron and Rain's daughter Hannah also attended the academy. Hannah possessed an extremely high ability to learn and utilize magic. Eventually, the Bloodlines project resulted in a group of individuals who were the best of what humanity had to offer. The project also resulted in the engineering of Metathran soldiers, an artificially created magical race. Just as Sarah crafted angels of light and faith, Urza constructed an army of sorcery and power to resist the coming invasion. They were called the Metathran in honor of the long-lost Thran civilization. Urza's Metathran children were conceived, birthed, and nurtured by an integrated system of machines. The Metathran were grown to maturity in artificial incubators, and they had a distinctive light blue hue and a tall, gangly appearance. All of them appeared male, even though they technically had no gender as they had no need to procreate. Their one and only purpose was to fight the Phyrexian menace. They were genetically engineered to be smarter, faster, and stronger. Ignate was one of the commanders of the Metathran army. Most warriors think in only 2 dimensions. Ignate and his Metathran brethren were trained to battle in 3. Urza was the first to understand that the war would not be lost for lack of power, but for lack of troops. The Metathran were stored in fast time bubbles until the beginning of the war, at which point they became freely expendable. None of the Metathran would survive the upcoming war, which is why you don't see any Metathran in the more current sets. Baron focused on the magical teachings at the academy, while Urza focused on building new artifacts, something he was quite good at, and Urza instructed the students in the use of artifacts. Urza began to notice a problem with Karn's behavior. Karn had lived a long time, and his emotional cortex was beginning to deteriorate. To fix this, Urza decided to erase Karn's memory. He made it so that Karn could only retain 40 years worth of memory at a time. Now we're going to shift our focus to the enemy for a little bit. Yawgmoth created an artificial plane called Wrath. Wrath was ruled as a Phyrexian fiefdom by appointed Evankars. The Wrathy stronghold produced a magical substance called Flowstone, which could increase the mass of the plane. This caused Wrath to slowly expand over centuries. As Wrath grew, regions of the plane would overlap with Dominaria briefly, bringing Dominarian inhabitants into this new hostile environment. Wrath continued to grow, and eventually it was going to become the same mass as Dominaria, at which point the 2 planes would fuse together and Wrath would transpose atop Dominaria, carrying its armies directly into the field. The Phyrexians didn't want to conquer Dominaria, they wanted to remake it. Basically, Wrath was just going to be a giant land portal for Yawgmoth's Phyrexian armies. It was a great plan, the perfect sneak attack, because the armies would become a part of Dominaria and surround them from all sides. After millennia of planning by the dark god Yawgmoth, the Phyrexian invasion finally began. And that concludes this section of Urza's storyline. If you'd like to learn more, go ahead and watch my part 3.